Let's crack on with our preview of the Australian Grand Prix. Last year, this race was won by Carlos Sainz of Ferrari. We know for certain that combination, at least, is not going to be victorious this time out. It's not one of the easier tracks to overtake on, but it is one of two tracks on the calendar that features 4 DRS zones. Sam, you have to go all the way back to 2012 for the last time that McLaren won this race with Jenson Button at the time. But many, after testing, suspect they will be the favourites going into this Grand Prix. Would you agree with that?
I mean, it's hard to look past the form that we saw throughout last year. Of course, they're the reigning Constructors' champions, and they go into this year for the first time in many a year defending a Constructors' title. Lando Norris, of course, is also coming back with a bit of a vengeance because he is wanting to claim his first driver's title and take it from the hands of Max Verstappen, who, let's face it, had an absolute blinder of a season last year in a car that was not the favourite, as displayed by it finishing third. So you would say that the bookies would put money on them to be the absolute favourite. Now, you have got a lot of challenges we expect to close right up, as this isn't a year that's featuring a lot of development. We're not expecting it to be kind of one of those years where a lot of there's kind of a huge boom in changes to the cars, as obviously all the teams will be focusing on 2026. We do expect the challenges to close much up to the front, so that midfield might take a step forward to the front might close up even more, and even Sauber, who were trailing very much so last year, should in theory get a little bit closer to that midfield and be a regular part of the battle. And that's if we get a brilliant year that kind of maybe encapsulates 2012, Ben, as you just referenced, where Jenson Button last one for McLaren. And I do think that McLaren going into this first race will probably have a very slight advantage just because they'll have that ability to step off the back of last season. But I don't think it's going to be kind of dry. We're expecting some really difficult weather circumstances across the weekend in Melbourne, and that is split across the weekend. Saturday's meant to be absolutely scorching. Then if we go by previous performances, that means it will favour the likes of Ferrari. Ferrari have regularly performed so well in very, very hot climates, weather that has allowed them to show off their cooling. The tyres are able to be kept at a right level of temperature. You look at the tracks such as COTA, for example, last year, where they did a great job. Mexico, again, they did a fantastic job there as well. Usually teams that don't thrive so well in very, very hot conditions, famously, are Mercedes. Now, I do believe that Mercedes overall probably will have taken a step forward from where they were last year, but I'm not expecting them to have completely removed all of these kind of bugbears and issues that they have had in that car for the last few years. And let's face it, they have struggled to understand what is wrong with their car over the last few years. And I'm sure they're very much hoping for the new regulations to kick in and they can kind of get started on something new. So I think McLaren will be ever so slightly ahead, but I expect the chasing pack to be right there nipping at their heels. And I think some slight weather, torrential downpours on those Sundays, could see a Max Verstappen rise to the very top again, even though I don't think that car will be at the very top.
Yeah, the potential of weather on Sunday is very interesting indeed. Harry, do you think McLaren are looking like the favourites going into this one?
I think of the back of testing, you'd have to say yes. McLaren do look like the favourites. Again, testing's always a difficult one to judge the form book from because, especially the one we had as well, as we've already mentioned.
Also this year, maybe.
Yeah, it was a very odd test with buses on track and rain in the desert. So... Yeah, even so, McLaren certainly look like they're the favourites there. But I, as you said, Sam, I think we're expecting this to be a super close season. Throw into the mix the weather, as you mentioned, which, a rainy Albert Park can be a chaotic race. I'm trying to think would the last one have been 2010? We had a wet race. We've had a few wet, maybe qualies, but
yeah, because we had rain in 2014. Quali, right?
Yeah.
Last race, maybe 2010.
2010. So it's been quite a while, and that can throw up all sorts of weird results. On top of that, even if we don't have any adverse weather, Albert Park, there is no form book, I would say, for it never follows the norm. I say never. Generally, never follows the norm for pace. Throughout the season, Albert Park. If you look at Ferrari last year, as you mentioned, Sam, it was hot conditions. They did thrive, but at that point of the season, when Carlos Sainz won in 2024, he dominated. I know Verstappen was out of the problem, but even so, Ferrari dominated that race at a point where the car wasn't. The rest of the first part of the year, they were not in that sort of position. and you go further back through the years of races out of park, and you get some odd winners, especially when it's the first race of the season. So even if McLaren have the fastest car on paper, and it might, ring true in qualifying, I think when it comes to race day, it could be a very different result. And then, if there is rain, then don't count out the likes of Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton for some surprise wins. So, on paper, you've got to say they're the favourites. Whether that actually turns out to be true, just look at Brazil 2024, where McLaren were clearly quickest, and then race day happened in the wet, and it all went to poo for them. So, I think anything could happen on come race day.
Quick maths, so apologies if it is incorrect, but since 2010, I think only 4 times the winner of the Grand Prix has gone on to win that season. So, you're right. The form book is often weird in Australia. I do think McLaren will be the favourites. Obviously, as mentioned, they are the defending champions from last year. And there are reasons to be optimistic. I think for the first couple of races, there will be a factor of they are the only team expected at the front to retain their lineup from 2024. There isn't going to be an adjustment period for Piastri or Norris because they were both there last year. Ferrari have got Hamilton coming in. Mercedes have got a rookie in Antonelli. Red Bull have got Lawson, who's only done a handful of races. So I think that will help McLaren, at least for these first 2 races. Also, the end of last season, I think some of their results were not as good as they looked. So Norris dominated Abu Dhabi. If you remember, that's where we ended last season. But there were a number of other races towards the end of the year that didn't look great, like Brazil and Qatar. But I think they were weekends that went sideways, not necessarily because of pace. If you think of Brazil and Qatar, they both had sprint races. McLaren won 2 in both sprints. They both didn't go to plan during the race because Brazil was very weather related. Qatar, Lando Norris had the penalty for speeding under yellow flags. But in terms of pace, they were still on it. So based on that, plus the preseason element that you've mentioned with testing, they look to be a couple attempts clear of their rivals in testing. They should be the favourites. But equally, I don't think the other team should be demoralised because testing proved that it was fairly close. And honestly, we might be, with it being, a tenth and a half, 2 tenths, what the data was showing from preseason testing, that could be track-to-track specific very easily. So, I'll give them the moniker of favourites, but not massively so. Lando Norris is a little bit more sceptical, Sam. He said that he thinks they might be tied with their rivals. Do you think this is just classic preseason downplaying of your own expectations?
I mean, there might be some of that, sure, but I think he's genuinely got a leg to stand on with this statement that he's made. It doesn't feel like it's come from the school of Toto Wolff where, we're very good at what we do, so therefore we have to pretend like we're never going to win anything ever again now. I don't think Lando Norris is down this school of thought. He is right to say that, through examples that both of you have already pointed out in the earlier comments that you've made, that McLaren, whilst having a slight edge in certain areas, it may only be track specific. If it isn't track specific, it is a tenth of a second. Now, the smallest of things can alter the difference of a tenth of a second. You might thrive in warm temperatures. You might not thrive in the wet. The car might struggle massively when it comes to wet weather conditions. It might work with certain tyres or certain areas of where that tyre might work on certain parts of the track. A tenth of a second is nothing. If you're new to F1, a tenth of a second is faster than you blinking your eyes. That's how small that gap is. It really can change in the snap of a finger, faster than that, in fact. So whilst I do believe that Lando Norris has every right to be slightly, reserved, taking a step back, cautious, I actually think there is kind of some factual analysis behind what he's saying, where Ferrari should feel good in what they've done. They came up with a statement earlier today as we record this that says that all of their simulation data worked perfectly. They were overjoyed with how much it was applied to their on-track setups that they were doing and that they were right on the right path of where they needed to be. Mercedes have felt more confident. Antonelli is apparently doing better than they expected. Russell has come out very motivated, and Max Verstappen is simply Max Verstappen. So when you have all of those factors involved, it's very hard to be overly confident on the first race of the season before we've got any actual competitive running to compare against to say that, hey, we aren't favourites. Actually, we need to see how things go, and they could definitely be there with us for the whole weekend, and if not the whole season.
Harry, McLaren's closest challengers last season, as mentioned during Sam's speech there, was Ferrari. Are they best positioned to challenge McLaren, do you think?
I think so, yes. They certainly have momentum versus, I think, Red Bull, which is mad to say because Red Bull won the Drivers' Championship last year. But I think you look where those teams were at the end of the season. Ferrari had the momentum over Red Bull, so you'd have to say that the Ferraris are going to be the ones that will challenge the McLarens. And like Sam said, there's some pretty positive noises, I think, from that end of the pit lane about how their testing has gone so far. So and obviously their driver lineup's all right, to be fair.
It's all right.
Yeah, it's not bad. So I think you'd have to say Ferrari are the ones that are going to be up there, but it's going to be very interesting because well, we'll get on to predictions in a minute. But I think whilst McLaren are clearly the favourites, I think it's you'd be foolish to underestimate the others around them. And again, this goes back to what I said about and what Sam said about it being a super tight race for the championship this year. I think we're going to find out pretty soon that this isn't going to be just so-and-so's favourite for the weekend. I think we're going to go to each weekend and have no idea. And I'm here for it.
The perfect formula is having no idea. Formula, no idea.
Nice.
The formula.
Cheers.
No.
Well, I am.
No. Ben, I will have a question for you.
No.
Yes, I know.
I didn't do it, I promise.
It's a serious question. We'll get onto it, I'm sure, at another point. The news just came out that Oscar Piastri is re-signed for McLaren. How do you think, with the famous Aussie curse, that will help with Piastri and McLaren's form going into this first race as potential favourites?
DNF, it's in Australia. Sorry.
Yeah, so true.
I think it's a good time to announce it. Like you say, I think we'll get into this in more depth on another episode, but certainly it is the sort of pickup you'd want just before the start of the season. I think McLaren and Piastri have timed this quite well. Should take him through until the end of 2027. And it just means that, both McLaren drivers are on something of a level playing field going into the season. It's not like we saw some favoritism towards Norris last year, but mostly just based on the championship position that they found themselves in. This season, starting on 0 points, contract-wise, they're pretty much exactly the same. I think it's just setting a good environment of, if you're able to perform on track, we've got no reason not to favour you over the other driver. So I think it will provide Piastri with the sort of pickup he needs. Not that you need a lot of it going into the first race of the season, but even so, I think it's good timing. There is a debut happening. There are many debuts happening this weekend. Quite a large rookie crop, should we call them? But I think one of maybe the most anticipated debut is that of Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. Obviously, the first time competitively at the Scuderia. Sam, what's your expectation for Hamilton? What can we expect to see from him?
I think he's just got to be there with Leclerc, if I'm totally honest. Despite him being one of the greatest to ever do it, if not the greatest to ever do it, all those wings, all those championships, he's still settling into a new environment that is completely alien to him. You've got to remember that even before he became a Formula One driver, Mercedes itself were a very key part of his career, pretty much since childhood, pretty much since he was in karting. He's been a part of the Mercedes family. Of course, they joined McLaren Mercedes and then the Mercedes Works team. So the fact that he's moved to Italy, he's integrating himself into Ferrari, he's learning a whole new language. She's back with Freddie Vass, which of course is a really good thing for him to have, because I do feel like Vasseur is almost like an on-track dad for Lewis Hamilton. They've been around each other for so long, and of course Vasseur was almost instrumental to Hamilton's junior career, which is amazing to see them come back together so late in the day. But I do think it's still going to take a bit of time. No matter who you are, settling to something that is that prestigious, has that much pressure around it, is going to take a little bit of time. So I expect Leclerc to be in front here in Australia. I do. But I also think that Hamilton, if he feels comfortable in that car, will be able to immediately get in a push. I just think that it will take a couple of races to really get to the absolute A game that we know Lewis Hamilton has. So there or thereabouts for Leclerc the whole weekend, and I think that'll be successful.
Yeah, that's where I landed with it. I don't necessarily think he needs to be beating Charles Leclerc in qualifying or the race this weekend. Like, Charles Leclerc is a tough old challenge. As Harry's already mentioned, it's a pretty good lineup overall. And I think it's easy to underestimate how much experience Charles Leclerc now has in the sport and indeed at Ferrari. This is his 7th year at the team. When he started with Ferrari, only 3 other drivers on the grid were also with the teams they're at now. So we shouldn't underestimate the experience that he brings, as well as the obvious pace as well. So I think if he stays close, that's fine. I'm just generally intrigued by what we see from Ferrari this weekend. There was more change with the car over the winter break than I think we were expecting. They haven't just gone with a simple evolution of the 2024 car. They've changed the suspension. They've gone from pull rod to push rod. The other way around. And I think they realized that the old suspension, they'd got as far as they possibly could with it, and realized to get another year of innovation, they were going to have to make that change. And the fact that they have proves they're still pushing for this season. Whether it all clicks straight away or not, that remains to be seen. Harry, your expectation for Lewis Hamilton this weekend?
Yeah, I think similar to you guys. It's, underestimate Lewis Hamilton at your peril, but I think you're right in saying that you'd expect Leclerc to be in front. And I think for Hamilton at the start of the year, it's to be there or thereabouts with Leclerc. If it's better than that, obviously that's a complete bonus for him. But I think be within a couple of grid spots of him, and then Sunday afternoon, Lewis Hamilton's sheer might of talent and expertise will take care of the rest. But I think it's probably going to be more emphasis on qualifying, and certainly in the first few races, to just make sure he's there or thereabouts of Leclerc. Like I say, if he's a couple of spots behind, that's enough. I think that's okay.
Let's now move on to Red Bull, of course, home of the defending drivers' champion, but this year not constructors' champion. Max Verstappen was talking about how competitive Red Bull might be going into this first race of the season. He said, "There's work to do. Looking at the lap times, I think McLaren will be the favourite. Things didn't run completely smoothly on our end in testing, but we have some ideas on how to improve. I've also spent a lot of time in the simulator. I don't think we'll be in the fight for the win in Melbourne, but hopefully we can implement some improvements over the next few races." Harry, it seems like Verstappen is downplaying his and his team's chances of winning straight away this season, but we know Verstappen can often pull out wins where you're not expecting it. How do you think it might go for him?
If it's a completely dry weekend, then I probably would agree with Verstappen here. Just again, based off testing. And this isn't to say he will not be hustling with a capital H, as I've said before. But I just think pure pace wise, it's not going to match up to McLaren at least. And I think probably Ferrari. But if the weather is to be believed, as you know, the forecast is saying, and Sunday's wet, it's game on. There's no way that Verstappen is not in a fight for the win. So, look, this is Verstappen downplaying his chances, obviously, as all F1 teams, drivers, people in the paddock do. But I wouldn't be so sure to count him out quite yet. For my drivers' championship predictions, he needs to retire immediately. But
Hater.
Well, apparently, according to the world, yes, apparently so. But yeah, look, I would not count him out of at least challenging for the podium. And like I said, if it's a wet race, then a podium and maybe even the win.
Sam, is it fair to say that he won't be in the fight? And going back to the question of weather, like, how much does that impact the answer?
Yeah, we saw a lot of issues with the car through testing. Not to say that car isn't quick. It will still be right up there at the sharp end of the season. But is it a case of no Nui, no Shui for this season when it comes to Red Bull?
And that's it. Thank you very much.
As a saying, that's not going to catch on, surely.
Get that on a T-shirt.
You know, it'll be in the Hall of Fame now. It'll find a way.
You know those hotcakes over there? This T-shirt's just outsold them.
Come on.
No, I think for the start of this season, Red Bull are going to be more in a situational win scenario where if the weather falls into it, whether there's a kind of a DNF or they find themselves on the right strategy due to a safety car or something, that is where Red Bull will play to the very front of the field. As Harry mentioned, if it's a completely dry session, I just don't think the car's built in the way that it's going to absolutely maximize the dry weather really, really well. You look at what McLaren and Ferrari were doing, and even Mercedes, they had these kind of the mini DRS wars, as we were calling it, where the flex in that rear wing seems to really show that they could take advantage of DRS. Of course, that means better overtaking. It means better straight line speed against your competitors. It also means better qualifying, where DRS is, of course, still available to our drivers. At a track like Australia, Melbourne, you have 4 DRS zones. Now, having that minute advantage in DRS when you have 4 of something, that adds up across a lap. That will give you that advantage. And it is still not particularly easy to overtake around here at Albert Park. So if you do get both McLarens, both Ferraris, and perhaps maybe a Georgie Russ right next to Max Verstappen, spicy, by the way, we'd love to see it, then it's going to be a tough battle, even for the likes of Max Verstappen, despite him being world-class. I agree with him. I do think on an equal playing field on a dry surface, that Red Bull is going to struggle to outdo everyone else on pure pace alone. But if the rain comes a-pouring, Max Verstappen, he will find a way to take advantage of that wet weather, and I'm sure he will find a way to carve his way to the front. As we saw in Blade Brazil 2024, he didn't have the best car there. Man drove from last to first and took it easily. So don't write him off. If there's even a hint of rain, he's got a hint of a chance of a win.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much uncertainty going into this race, particularly with it being the first race of the season. I know we have testing data which can give us a hint, but I don't know. He might be right. He might be completely wrong. Like they might go in and actually be quicker than McLaren. They might go in and be the 4th fastest team. Neither result would particularly surprise me. My instinct is saying that based on preseason testing and how last season ended, they really needed to make big gains to regain that initiative. And I don't think they've done that. I don't think testing indicated they'd done that. We do have, I think, a little bit less information to go on when it comes to Red Bull versus, say, McLaren and particularly and Mercedes. I think they got smoother long runs in, whereas Red Bull was a bit more disrupted. They had the fewest laps completed of all the teams that took part in testing. So, and we know that the second half of last season wasn't plain sailing for Red Bull. It's why they haven't won the Constructors' Championship. I know Verstappen did manage to get 2 wins out of the car in Brazil and in Qatar, but I think the emphasis of that sentence is that Verstappen got those wins out of the car rather than that they had a pure advantage over the rest of the field, and he was able to take advantage of that. So, yeah, my instinct is they are maybe a touch behind, but as you've already said on this podcast, Harry, that Verstappen, if it has a bit of pace in it, he gonna be hustling with a capital H. Because again, that car looked unbalanced in qualifying. It didn't look great, but it still had some pace in it. So I think we might get, what I'm most interested in is the race pace. I think qualifying, Verstappen will find something in it, but can he consistently get that out lap after lap after lap? That's what I'm not sure about. And again, it's not a question of Verstappen, it's a question of the car.
It's very understeery, wasn't it? And he likes an oversteery car. He likes a pointy end. And if we're going to have a lot of rain, and rain tends to come with wind, then there's every chance that car can be thrown off course quite easily, and that might unsettle him. So it's going to be a tough battle for him.
Harry, I don't think Verstappen's ever been accepting of just a solid race, but would the team be accepting of just a bit of a foundation race to start off the year?
I think so. Like, Red Bull have been around long enough that they know that you can't win every race, and I think Verstappen knows this as well. There were races last year where Verstappen just brought home the bacon when that car didn't deserve to. Silverstone springs to mind. He got a podium there when that car shouldn't have been on the podium, and I think he knows that championships are not built on winning every race. Ignore 2023. Mainly not built on winning every race. So if it's going to be a super tight season, he knows that just bringing home as many points as possible is what wins you a championship. So I think they'll be satisfied if it is just a solid race. What they don't want is to be on the back foot straight away with DNFs, trying to trying to get results out of the car that it won't do. So yeah, a solid race will definitely. I think they'll be relatively satisfied.
Of course, Max Verstappen only represents half of the Red Bull team. We've got Liam Lawson making his debut for Red Bull at this race weekend. Sam, what are you expecting from him?
I think it's going to be a tough one for Liam Lawson. I think he'll go into it with that same attitude that he presented last season, that, I'm a big man about town. I'm here to challenge the likes of Fernando Alonso. I don't care who you are, unless you're Max Verstappen. I'll get out of your way very quickly. Please don't get annoyed at me, Max. I think he's going to be flipping the bird at people, getting fines. But that's Liam Lawson. That's what he does. He's got that Red Bull mentality. And that's why they picked him over the likes of Yuki Tsunoda. It's why he's Red Bull through and through. But are we expecting him to realistically be up there challenging with Max Verstappen? No, I'm not, especially if it does rain, because where the car, I think, would be slower overall in the dry, I think that Max Verstappen will actually be able to get so much more out of it in the wet that the gap will be larger if it is a wet weather Grand Prix. I think Liam Lawson will be at the back of that top set of cars. So, sitting behind your Mercedes, your Ferrari, your McLarens, while Max is in that pack fighting. I think Liam will be probably somewhere with Kimi Antonelli kind of finding their feet. And there's no shame in that. There's absolutely no judgment in what he was trying to do there. He's adjusting to one of the most competitive and difficult environments within Formula One and therefore within motorsport in that Red Bull team. He's got a lot on his shoulders, and he's got to prove that them getting rid of Perez, not picking Yuki Tsunoda, which was the public opinion's choice, but going for him is the right choice. And I don't know how long he's realistically got to prove that he was the right person to put in that car, but he's going to make sure that he does everything he can from race one to show that he's got what it takes to be a Red Bull driver. They've struggled with that second seat famously for years now, since Daniel Ricciardo left. But as long as he's competitive, as long as he's fighting with those other teams around him and he's not kind of 15, 20 seconds adrift from the other seven, I think realistically that'll be a solid start for Liam Lawson.
I think Liam Lawson overall, and not just looking at this race, has more time than people think he's going to have. Like, I'm not saying they're going to give him 5 years. Doesn't matter what happens in those 5 years. But I don't necessarily think he needs to be on it from the off. I know that they have developed something of a reputation, largely brought by what they did with Pierre Gasly as an example, where they only gave him half a season. But Alex Albon, they gave 1.5 years. And most recently, Sergio Perez, they almost had the opposite problem. Like, they gave him 4 full seasons with the team, and their issue was giving him contract extensions too early. Now, I'm not suggesting that there is a middle ground you can find, Red Bull. Like, it does exist. You don't even need to fire someone after 4 years or one race. But I think they will give Lawson time to get embedded within this team. For this race specifically, don't crash. And that's it. Just get some consistency and, I don't know, build yourself into the car. I don't think you need to. I think it's very unlikely that on his best day, he'll be competing with Verstappen from the off. So don't set yourself that as the target. Just make sure that you do the full race. You do start to get accustomed with the car. And honestly, like, we still want to see a fiery side to Liam Lawson. As you rightly say, Sam, I think that is a reason why they picked him over Tsunoda. But if he's getting involved in scraps with Fernando Alonso, that's a problem this year. It wasn't a problem last year because he was probably punching above his weight if he was getting in a fight with Alonso last year. If he's getting a fight with Alonso this year, it means he's not as high up the grid as he should be in that Red Bull. So, not saying shy away from fights, but pick your battles is what I would probably say to Liam Lawson.
So in true late breaking fashion, the advice you're giving him is don't crash.
Would you say that's bad advice?
No. Yeah. You've got me there, Ben. You've got me. Yeah.
Don't crash. You can have that one on the house, Liam Lawson. Harry, your thoughts on Liam Lawson?
We should start charging.
I was going to say, you'd said if he's fighting Fernando Alonso, he's further down the grid. Fernando might just be being Fernando. You never know.
Harry, get off the train. Leave the train at the station.
I will never leave that train. You'll see
something. I think it was on Twitter where someone just posted like the Fernando Alonso winning graphic and was like, "What happens if you wake up on Sunday morning and you just see this?
You overslept." And
yeah,
like this. Lawson. just needs a quiet weekend. It needs a quiet first few races. Like you said, don't get too scrappy. Don't try and beat Max Verstappen, which I know is a ridiculous thing to say, but if that's his target straight away, it's unreasonable, and you're going to have a crash because he'll overdrive and it won't happen. And I mean that with all the respect in the world. It's not going to happen. It might. I'm not saying it will. It's more likely to happen further down the line than it is at race 1, 2, or 3 of the season. So he needs to make sure he's not comparing himself to Verstappen, because I think that would just lead to more problems. So a quiet weekend, just as you said, solid, and it might also help if the Red Bull isn't quite as competitive as it was last year. It might just help him, fly under the radar a little bit, have a solid first race or two, and go from there. Just build some foundations. Don't build your house on the sand. Build it on the concrete.
Oh, okay. Philosophical Harry.
I just finished writing "Don't crash."
Don't build your house on the sand. Good Lord. I mean, you speak about don't try and beat Verstappen. I feel like we said the same thing about Charles Leclerc when he first moved to Ferrari, was up against Vettel. And of course,
oh my word.
We said don't try and beat Vettel. It's okay to settle in. And then race 1, can I go past, please? I'm faster. I'm not saying that, but in his mind, I think he should be targeting beat Verstappen and just be okay with not beating him.
Yeah, that's probably more the better way to say it is, don't get too fixated on it. If he is as quick, then don't be like, I can't. Down. Yeah. Whoa, I'm too quick. Whoa.
Let's take the gas off.
But yeah, like you say, don't be okay if you're not beating Verstappen. Don't chase it if it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I haven't said this in quite a long time.
Here we go.
I haven't said it in 2025 yet. Shall we do some bold predictions?
Yes!
Gather around, little children, and listen to my song about my F1 bold predictions and how they'll all be wrong.
If you're new to the podcast, we come with jingles.
Sometimes.
And wrong bold predictions. Yeah, we don't famously get many of these right, but we give it a go on every single race weekend to see if we can predict something bold that will happen. Harry, you managed to win this one last year, so you get the honour of going first.
Oh, thank you. My bold prediction is that Carlos Sainz will get a podium.
Oh my God!
Well, why have you pooed all over mine?
Yeah, mine is now pathetic.
Hey, the Williams looks good. Carlos Sainz won this race last year. It might rain. That's absolute podium territory in my books.
Are you sure you haven't looked into my bold predictions from last year and just changed Nico Hulkenberg's name?
It's race 1. I'll tone it down after this when it's inevitably very wrong.
I wish I hadn't gone to you first, because mine looks awful now. I think Sainz is going to get a top 6 finish. Ooh,
big man.
Wow. Podium over here.
You're cool.
Yeah. That is actually my bold prediction.
He's going to finish 4th, isn't he?
Yeah. This is the revenge tour of me for this whole year.
Yeah, but that's such a
this is where it starts.
Shocker last year that it's going to be
Ben
a
gets
big
every
year.
single one right by just slightly altering Harry's bold prediction.
Whatever Harry said, -1.
Yeah.
Sam, please tell me you have a bold prediction that doesn't involve Carlos Sainz.
Imagine if I'm like Carlos Sainz top 5. No. The curse is broken. An Australian will win the Australia Grand Prix.
Jack Dern.
I'm not saying names just in case.
Cover your options. I like it. Cool. Poll 1, 2, 3. Harry.
I'm going for a Lando Norris poll. Sorry. I'm going for a Charles Leclerc win.
Who?
I'm going for Norris second and Carlos Sainz is third.
I know what's happened. Someone hasn't told you he's not a Ferrari anymore.
What?
You're the blue.
You've gone for a double Ferrari podium.
It's not all HP, mate.
I'm only joking for people who are new or think I'm an idiot, which is everyone. I know that he's a Williams now.
Sam, what have you got?
Pole, I've gone for Lando Norris. The win, I've gone for Max Verstappen. Second place, I've got... No, that doesn't make sense. It's not Australian. I forgot my own prediction.
It'd be lovely, mate.
Max, you're Aussie. Run with it. No. I technically can do that, I suppose, can't I? But I'm not going to.
I'd advise not.
No. The win is Oscar Piastri. Second place, Max Verstappen.
Oh,
Max,
dear.
you've been
Did you see that coming?
demoted.
Did you see that coming? Third is going to be Lando Norris.
It's been a long winter, folks.
I've just thawed out.
Sam, I'll give you 2 points if Verstappen wins the race on track, and then due to a penalty post-race, Piastri wins.
Okay, you've got a deal.
I'm making it a trio of Lando Norris pole positions, but I have actually got him winning the race as well. I've got Oscar Piastri in second, so somewhat lifting the curse, but not completely, and Charles Leclerc in third.
Got a good mix there.
Good mix indeed.
Nice.